My wife had my brother's baby. Now my family wants my money. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My name's Jake Miller. I'm 29 years old. And if you told me a few years ago that my own brother and my wife would betray me in the worst possible way, I would have laughed it off as something that only happens in soap operas or trashy reality shows. But life has a cruel sense of humor, and I ended up living that nightmare. To understand how I got here, I need to start from the beginning, my childhood. I grew up in what most people would probably describe as a regular suburban American family. 2 parents, 2 sons, middle-class neighborhood, backyard barbecues, birthday parties, family road trips. From the outside, it looked picture perfect. But on the inside, things were never balanced. My younger brother, Ethan, was the golden child. He could do no wrong. If he got a B on a test, my parents treated it like he'd discovered electricity. If I brought home an A, the response was usually something like, well, good, but don't get cocky. When Ethan scored a goal in soccer, the whole family went out for ice cream. When I made the varsity basketball team, they barely mentioned it at dinner. At first, as a kid, I brushed it off. I thought maybe I was being dramatic, or maybe I just wasn't as easy to love. But as I got older, the favoritism became clearer and sharper, like a knife that kept cutting a little deeper every year. I remember one birthday in particular, my 16th. I'd been working my butt off at school and had just gotten an acceptance letter to a competitive summer program that only a handful of students in my state were invited to. I came home expecting at least a cake, maybe a congratulations card. Instead, I walked into the living room and saw balloons and streamers. My heart jumped. I thought, finally, they're celebrating me. But then I saw the cake. It said, "Congratulations, Ethan," in big, bold frosting letters. I froze in the doorway, staring like an idiot while everyone clapped for my brother. He was grinning, holding up some certificate from a local art contest he'd entered. Don't get me wrong, it was nice he'd won something. But the entire party, balloons, decorations, cake, was for him. On my birthday. When I asked my parents why they hadn't thrown me a party for my actual achievement, they gave me that look. The one that said I was the problem for even asking. My dad sighed and said, "We didn't want your brother to feel left out. You should be happy for him, Jake, not throwing a tantrum." That broke me in a way I can't even fully describe. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just overlooked, I was unwanted. That day I promised myself that as soon as I turned 18, I was out. And I kept that promise. At 18, I packed my bags, scraped together some savings from a part-time job at a gas station, and moved out. I paid for college with loans and shifts at a local diner. Nobody from my family called to check on me. Nobody asked how I was doing. Birthdays, holidays, graduations, radio silence. And as painful as that was, I found peace in it. I figured if they didn't care enough to want me in their lives, why should I keep begging for scraps of attention? College was rough. I lived in a cramped apartment with a buddy who was just as broke as I was. We had cockroaches, leaky faucets, and nights where dinner was a couple of packs of ramen split between us. But it was mine. I was free. After graduation, I started building my career. Slowly, things got better. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I even met a woman, Lauren. Lauren was smart, charming, and made me feel like I mattered. For someone who'd grown up being overlooked and dismissed, that feeling was addictive. We dated, fell in love, and eventually got married. For the first time in my life, I thought I'd finally found a family where I belonged. Years passed, and I had cut ties with my parents and Ethan completely. But then, last year, I got a message out of the blue. It was from Ethan. He said our parents missed me and wanted to reconnect. At first, I laughed. Missed me? The same people who celebrated my brother's art contest on my birthday? The same people who never called, never visited, never cared if I was alive or dead. But Lauren encouraged me to give them a chance. She said maybe time had changed them. Maybe they regretted how they treated me. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe people could change. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. The first few meetings were awkward. My parents acted overly sweet, asking me about work, about my marriage, about life in general. Ethan shook my hand, patted me on the back, and said he was glad to have his brother back. I wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to believe we could start fresh. So, I did something I'd lived to regret. I invited them over to my home. That's when Ethan met Lauren. At first, I didn't notice anything off. Ethan would come by, sometimes with my parents, sometimes alone. We'd have dinner, watch a game, chat. It felt strange, but normal. Then, a few months later, Lauren told me she was pregnant. I was ecstatic. I'd always wanted kids. I hugged her, kissed her, promised I'd be the best dad I could be. For a brief moment, it felt like all the pain of my past was behind me. But then Ethan started coming over more often. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was reconnecting, after all. But things got weird, really weird, when he started rubbing Lauren's pregnant belly and talking to it like he was the father. I brushed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. Lauren reassured me. It's not a big deal, Jake. Don't overthink it. But deep down, my gut screamed that something was wrong. 6 months into the pregnancy, I couldn't take the gnawing suspicion anymore. One night, while Lauren was asleep, I grabbed her phone. What I found shattered me. The texts between her and Ethan weren't vague. They weren't questionable. They were explicit. They joked about our baby. They talked about how they'd eventually tell me after the birth. They even discussed how they'd live off my child support once Lauren divorced me. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. The woman I loved, and the brother who'd always been handed everything were conspiring behind my back, planning a future together, funded by me. The next morning, I confronted Lauren. She denied it at first, but when I shoved the texts in her face, she broke down and confessed. That was the end of my marriage. 2 years, gone in an instant. And of course, when the dust settled, my parents sided with Ethan and Lauren. The day I told Lauren it was over, she didn't beg. She didn't even really apologize. Instead, she went cold, like a switch had flipped. She said things like, "You were never enough for me, Jake." Or, "You should be happy I even stayed this long." It wasn't remorse, it was cruelty. And it cut me deeper than I thought words ever could. We filed for divorce soon after. I thought maybe, just maybe, the truth would set me free. That once everyone saw the evidence, I'd finally have justice. But I underestimated the power of family favoritism. My parents immediately jumped to Ethan and Lauren's defense. In their eyes, Ethan could do no wrong, even if he slept with his brother's wife and got her pregnant. They spread lies about me. They told anyone who would listen that I was controlling, toxic, that I made Lauren quit her job. None of it was true. Quitting had been her choice, something she told me she wanted to do. But by the time we got to court, it didn't matter. Lauren had a lawyer who spun the narrative like a Broadway playwright. My parents backed every word. I sat there listening as they painted me as some abusive monster, while the real cheaters sat smugly across from me. It was like being erased from my own story. When the settlement was finalized, Lauren walked away with a fat chunk of my savings, my car, and the smug support of my family. Me? I kept the house, but I felt like I'd lost everything else. My wife, my brother, my parents, my dignity. I remember walking out of that courthouse, the cold air slapping me in the face, thinking, so this is it. This is rock bottom. I could have drowned in bitterness. I could have let their lies define me. But something inside me refused to die. I threw myself into work. Early mornings, late nights, grinding through projects, determined to prove, to myself, if no one else, that I wasn't the loser they made me out to be. For months, I barely slept. I ate takeout at my desk, drank too much coffee, and ignored the ache in my chest that came every time I thought about Lauren and Ethan. Slowly, I climbed. My performance got noticed. My boss started giving me bigger responsibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I was clawing my way out of the hole. 2 weeks ago, my hard work paid off. I got promoted. Better title, bigger salary, a company car. When HR handed me the paperwork, I wanted to cry. Out of relief, out of pride, out of sheer exhaustion. For years, I'd been treated like a nobody. Now, I was finally being recognized for what I could do. That night, I took myself out to dinner. Just me, a steak, and a glass of whiskey. I even posted a picture online, a rare moment of celebrating myself. That was my mistake. A few days later, my phone lit up with a call I hadn't expected in years. It was my mother. At first, I thought maybe it was a butt dial. But no, she left a voicemail. Her voice was syrupy sweet, like the way you talk to a stranger you're trying to charm. She said she'd seen my post about the promotion, and she wanted me to come visit. I stared at the phone in disbelief. This was the same woman who sided with Ethan when he destroyed my marriage. The same woman who told me to be happy for them because they'd found love. Now she wanted me to visit? I ignored her, But the calls kept coming. Then the texts. Then, one day, she showed up at my office. She made a scene at the front desk, arguing with the receptionist, demanding to see me. I was humiliated. To get her out, I promised I'd visit in a few days. And against my better judgment, I did. When I pulled up to their new house, I realized just how much they'd profited from my divorce. The place was bigger than the one I grew up in, freshly painted, with a shiny new car in the driveway. All of it, I suspected, paid for with the money they'd drained from me. Inside, the baby had already been born, just over 3 weeks old. I didn't want to look, didn't want to think about how that child could have been mine if not for the betrayal. Ethan wasn't home, and Lauren was asleep. So it was just me and my parents. We sat in the living room in an awkward silence for 5 minutes. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and said it. Ethan lost his job. Things have been hard. We saw your promotion online, Jake. Maybe you could help us out, just until things get better. I couldn't believe the audacity. These were the people who called me toxic, who testified against me in court, who celebrated when my life fell apart. Now they wanted me to bail them out. For a few minutes, I sat there stunned, too angry to even speak. Finally, I stood up, walked to the door, and left without a word. As I stepped outside, the sky opened up. Heavy rain poured down, soaking me as I crossed the lawn toward my car. And that's when I saw him. Ethan. He was standing there, surprised to see me. My parents rushed out behind me, calling for me to stop, to listen. But I wasn't in the mood to listen. I pulled out my keys, fumbling in the rain, when Ethan finally spoke up. His voice wasn't cocky this time. It was desperate. Jake, please, just hear me out. We really need your help. I froze, staring at him. My brother, the smug golden child who'd taken everything from me, was begging. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, I just felt disgust. I snapped. I told them to leave me alone, to figure it out themselves. I told them if they were that desperate, they could beg on the streets, because strangers would have more pity than I did. Then I got in my car and drove off, leaving them standing in the rain. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power. And God, it was satisfying. For 2 days after that rainy night, I couldn't shake the image of them standing there, drenched, pleading. Part of me felt triumphant. I'd finally stood up to them. Another part of me, the one that still carried the wounds of being that neglected kid, felt guilty. My phone buzzed constantly. Dozens of texts from my mother. Jake, please, you don't understand our situation. We're family. Don't turn your back on us again. Be the bigger man. Help your brother. The guilt gnawed at me. I knew I had money now. I knew that cutting them off wouldn't hurt me financially. But it wasn't about the money. It was about principle. Why should I save the same people who stood by while my brother destroyed my marriage? Why should I help the ones who lied in court to strip me of what little dignity I had left? I stared at those messages, my thumb hovering over reply, and finally set the phone down. If I answered in the heat of guilt, I'd cave. And I wasn't going to let them win again. A few days later, I heard a knock at my door. I knew before I even looked who it was. Ethan. I opened the door, arms crossed. What do you want? He gave me that half smile I'd seen 1,000 times growing up, the one that always got him out of trouble. Can I come in? No, I said flatly. He shifted awkwardly, then started talking. Look, Jake, I know things weren't always fair when we were kids, and I feel bad about how you were treated. But I can't help it if I'm just better at certain things. That's why Mom and Dad favored me. I laughed bitterly. Better? You mean better at screwing over your own brother? His jaw tightened. You're being ridiculous. This isn't about the past. This is about now. Our parents need help. Lauren and I need help. You're in a good position, Jake. Why hold grudges like a child? Something in me snapped. Because you took everything from me, Ethan. My wife. My chance at being a father. My dignity. And you expect me to write you a check like none of that happened? His mask cracked. His voice rose. You're just jealous. Mom and Dad always saw me for who I was. And even Lauren preferred me over you. That's why she came to me. And you know what? She was right too. You were never man enough for her. I should have slammed the door in his face. Instead, I smiled. You're right, Ethan. This is revenge. And I'm enjoying every second of it. His face went red. He leaned in, spitting his words. You'll regret this, Jake. I'll make sure you pay one way or another. I shut the door on him mid-sentence. I thought maybe that was the end of it. But no. A few nights later, my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was Lauren. I almost let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Her voice was sugary at first. Jake, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. But please, just give me a minute. I stayed silent. She continued. You know things have been hard for us. Ethan lost his job. The settlement and alimony just aren't enough with a baby. I realize I don't deserve your help after everything. But could you just think about it? For your parents' sake? Be the bigger person. I laughed, a short, humorless bark. Be the bigger person? Lauren, I already am. I walked away from you without burning down your whole world like you did mine. I'm already paying alimony you don't deserve. That's more than enough charity. Her tone hardened. You're being selfish. Heartless. After everything I gave you. Everything you gave me? I cut in. You gave me lies, betrayal, and humiliation. That's what you gave me. There was silence on the line for a moment, then soft sobs. Finally, she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. Fine. If you won't help willingly, then we'll take it. Ethan was right. You left us no choice. I'll go back to court, demand higher alimony. You'll regret this, Jake. I almost laughed again. Go ahead. Try me this time. And I hung up. The first time around, I'd been too broken to fight. I let their lies stand. I paid up just to escape. But now, I wasn't the same man. I called my lawyer the next morning. I want to fight this, I told him. All of it. I want the alimony gone. She doesn't deserve a cent. He agreed and asked me to gather everything I had. So I did. I reached out to old friends, people who'd seen how Lauren treated me, who'd seen the manipulation, the gaslighting, the abuse. Many of them didn't even know the truth of what had happened. When I told them, they were furious on my behalf. I'll testify, one said immediately. I'll tell the judge what she did to you. I contacted cousins who'd grown up with us. They'd seen firsthand how my parents favored Ethan and belittled me. They agreed to record statements too. Piece by piece, I built my case. For once, I wasn't just reacting. I was fighting back. The day of the hearing came. Lauren sat across from me, Ethan by her side, my parents behind them. They looked confident, smug, as if they'd already won. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had friends, relatives, people who knew the truth. When the testimonials played, the smugness started to fade. Friends describing how Lauren cheated. Cousins explaining how my family treated me like an outsider. The narrative they'd built, me as the villain, Ethan as the hero, crumbled before their eyes. My lawyer laid it all out clearly. I wasn't toxic. I wasn't controlling. I was the victim of betrayal from my own family. By the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Not only was Lauren denied any increase in alimony, my obligation was wiped clean entirely. For the first time in years, I felt free. I glanced at Lauren. Her face was pale, eyes wet. Ethan's jaw was clenched, his fists tight. My parents looked like someone had slapped them. And me? I felt lighter than I had in years. I left the courthouse with a smile. I planned to go home, order takeout, watch a movie, and finally relax. But of course, they couldn't let me have peace. As I pulled into my street, I saw Ethan's car parked outside my house. My stomach dropped. Sure enough, my whole family was waiting by my front door. I parked, got out, and said coldly, "Get off my property. Now." My dad stepped forward. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Jake. Turning your back on your family. You've betrayed us all." I didn't reply. He kept going, ranting about duty, about responsibility, about blood being thicker than water. Still, I said nothing. My silence clearly got under their skin. My mother demanded I respect my father and respond. I just stared at them. Finally, Ethan snapped. He lunged forward, grabbed me by the collar, and pulled his fist back. My dad barely managed to hold him back. "You're nothing but a jealous loser." Ethan spat. "You'll never be anything." I smirked. Funny words coming from an unemployed man living off his brother. That did it. They screamed, cursed, begged, threatened, but I stayed calm. "Finally," I said, "you have 5 minutes to get off my property before I call the cops. And considering you're broke, I'd suggest running." They left, muttering, defeated. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd truly won. The next morning, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in years. Silence. Not the heavy silence of being ignored, not the awkward silence of family gatherings where I didn't belong. This was different. This was peace. No buzzing phone. No guilt-tripping texts. No brother at my door. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. I made coffee, sat on my porch, and just listened to the world around me. Birds chirped. A neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere down the street, kids laughed as they played. Ordinary sounds, but to me, they felt like freedom. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't help but reflect on everything. I thought about that 16-year-old boy who walked into a birthday party only to find it wasn't for him. The boy who promised himself he'd leave and never look back. I thought about the college kid scraping by on loans and diner tips, telling himself he didn't need anyone. I thought about the husband who believed he'd finally found love, only to be betrayed by the two people who should have protected him most. And then I thought about the man who stood in court and finally told his truth and won. It had taken me years, heartbreak, and humiliation, but I realized something important. I wasn't weak. I wasn't lesser. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was stronger than all of them combined. Work became my sanctuary. My promotion opened doors, and for once, people saw me for what I could do, not for what my family said about me. I started hitting the gym again, rediscovering strength not just in my career, but in my body. The more I pushed myself, the more I felt alive. I even reconnected with a few old friends, the ones who'd stood by me during the divorce, who'd testified for me when it mattered. Nights out, laughter, conversations that weren't dripping with manipulation or guilt. It reminded me that not everyone in my life had betrayed me. For the first time, I started to believe in the possibility of building a family of my own again. Not necessarily with blood, but with people who chose me. One evening, as I sat at my desk, I wrote down what I'd learned. Maybe it was for me, maybe for someone else someday, but I needed to put it into words. Respect yourself. If someone disrespects you, family, spouse, anyone, you do not have to tolerate it. Never beg for love. If they can't give it freely, it isn't real. You owe nothing to those who betrayed you. Blood doesn't erase cruelty. Hard work pays off. Maybe not right away, maybe not in the way you expect, but it does. Silence is powerful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling, but walking away and living better. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I folded the paper and tucked it into my journal. Because that was my truth now. My family hasn't contacted me since that night on my lawn. Maybe they finally got the message. Maybe they found someone else to leech off. Maybe they're still out there, stewing in bitterness. I don't care. That chapter of my life is closed. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll meet someone new. Maybe I'll build a family on my own terms. Maybe I'll just keep climbing at work and spoiling myself with steaks and whiskey. But whatever happens, it'll be my choice. My life. My rules. For the first time in decades, I'm not the outsider anymore. I'm free.